The call came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, and Lorne KDO almost didn't answer it. He was already in his work boots by the door, keys in hand, the last light off in the back of the garage. He'd been at KDO Auto and Tire for 14 hours straight. A timing belt job that turned into a head gasket situation, then a clutch replacement that nobody had budgeted for, and finally a brake line on a '09 Silverado that had no business still being on the road. His hands were cracked at the knuckles. His lower back had stopped hurting around hour 10, which he'd learned meant it was past hurting and into something worse. The phone buzzed on the workbench. Unknown number. Provincial prefix, somewhere north of the city. He picked it up. "Is this KDO Auto?" The voice was young. Female, tight, like she was holding something in. "It is," Lorne said. Are you still open?" He looked at the dark bay behind him, looked at the clock, thought about the heating pad he'd left plugged in at home that was probably a fire hazard by now. "What's going on?" he said. There was a pause. Wind on the line, or maybe breath. "My van broke down on Barry Road, just past the turnoff for Coldwater. I've got my daughter with me. She's 3. It's really cold." Lorne KDO stood there in the dark of his shop, keys in his hand, and did not think about it for very long at all. "Stay on the line," he said. "I'm coming." He'd been running KDO Auto for 11 years by then, ever since his uncle Fernand had handed him the keys and moved down to Moncton for a woman named Patricia who turned out to be worth it. The shop was on the edge of Penetanguishene, one of those flat-roofed buildings that looked like it was perpetually apologizing for being there. The sign had been missing its E for 3 years. Lorne kept meaning to fix it. He never did. He was 34. He had a grade 11 education and a second-year apprenticeship from Georgian College that he hadn't finished because his mother had gotten sick, and then sicker and then gone. And after that the shop had been what kept him from going too far into his own head. He knew engines the way some people know music, not from being taught, but from listening so long that the language became his own. He could hear a misfire across a parking lot. He could feel a bad bearing through the chassis before it registered as sound. He charged fair prices. He didn't upsell. He stayed late. He wasn't rich. He was barely not behind. But he'd built something. In a town where a lot of things had been taken apart and not put back together, he'd built something that worked. Her name was Rune McAllister. She was 26. When Lorne pulled off Barry Road at 12:20 in the morning and found her standing beside a 14 Dodge Caravan, with her hazards blinking orange into the dark, she looked like someone who had been holding herself together by main force for a very long time and was now down to the last few threads. Her daughter, Bea, was asleep in the back seat, wrapped in a coat that was too big and smelled like fabric softener. The van had a snapped serpentine belt and a coolant leak. He could see the steam even in the cold, and the temperature outside was sitting at -14. "How long have you been out here?" Lorne asked. 2 hours. She said it without drama. Just a fact. "I called a tow company out of Barry first. They said they couldn't come for another 3 hours. Then I tried the one in Midland. Voicemail. And the third?" She looked at him. "You were the third." He didn't say anything. He got his flashlight and looked under the hood and confirmed what he already knew. "I can't fix this here," he said, "but I can get you off this road tonight. We'll tow you back to the shop. I'll find somewhere warm for you and your daughter to sit, and I'll start on it first thing. It's almost 1 in the morning. I know. I should tell you, I don't have a lot of..." She stopped, tried again. "I'm not sure what this is going to cost." Lorne pulled out his phone to call his flatbed guy. "Let's get you warm first," he said. "We'll sort the rest out later." The shop was cold, but not outside cold. Lorne had a space heater in the office and a cot in the back room that he'd never technically admitted was there, that he'd used exactly twice during ice storms, and once when his truck wouldn't start in February. He set it up with the spare blanket from the cabinet and made 2 cups of the instant coffee that was all he had, even though the girl, Rune, said she didn't need anything, she needed something. He could see it. Bea woke up when they came in and looked around with the serious, calm expression of a toddler who has learned that the world contains surprises and decided to be philosophical about it. She accepted the coffee cup as a toy and held it with both hands. "She's good," Lorne said. "She doesn't know yet," Rune said quietly. She was sitting on the edge of the cot, coat still on. "That things are hard. I'm trying to keep it that way as long as I can." Lorne sat down on the stool across from her and drank his coffee and didn't say anything for a moment. "Where were you headed?" he finally asked. "Sudbury. My sister's. She paused. We left Oshawa today. We didn't leave for a vacation. He understood. He didn't push. Okay, he said, you sleep here tonight. I'll start on the van at 6. You have other customers. I have a 9 o'clock appointment for a tire rotation. He can wait 20 minutes. She looked at him like she was trying to find the catch, like she'd been trained to look for it. I'm not going to charge you for the cot, he said dryly. Something in her face changed. Not a smile exactly, but the held thing loosened just slightly. Okay, she said. He didn't sleep much. He rarely did when there was a job waiting. He lay in his truck in the back lot for 4 hours with the engine running for heat, half dreaming about serpentine belt routing diagrams, and was up and in the bay by 6:15. The belt was a straightforward replacement. The coolant leak was coming from a cracked overflow reservoir. He had one in salvage that was the right fit. He cleaned the battery terminals while he was at it, because they were corroded down to almost nothing, and whoever had been looking after this van hadn't been. At 7:15, Rune appeared in the doorway between the office and the bay, Bia on her hip, both of them with the soft, disoriented look of people who hadn't slept well somewhere unfamiliar. You're all ready. She looked at the van up on the hoist. How long have you been here? Bit, Lorne said. Did you sleep, Bit? She stood there watching him work for a moment. Bia pointed at the hydraulic hoist and said something in the private language of 3-year-olds. She wants to know what that is, Rune said. Hoist. Lifts the car up so I can see underneath. Bea considered this with great seriousness and then pointed at Lorne. That's the mechanic, Rune said softly. Lorne, he said. He looked up briefly. My name's Lorne. He had her done by 9:40. The tire rotation appointment came and went. His regular, a semi-retired postal worker named Fitch, who always brought Timbs and always wanted to talk about the Leafs, which Lorne did not care about but had learned to approximate. Fitch didn't notice the woman and the toddler sitting in the waiting area, or if he didn't mention it. After Fitch left, Lorne went into the office and wrote up the invoice. He held it for a moment before handing it over. Serpentine belt, parts and labor, overflow reservoir, salvage price, battery terminal cleaning, no charge. Tau, standard rate, reduced by 20% because he'd called in the favor from his flatbed guy personally. He handed it to Rune. She looked at it. He watched the calculation happen in her face, the relief and the worry landing at the same time, trading off. She looked up. This is less than I expected. Parts aren't expensive on that model. Wasn't a complicated job. She looked at it again. Something in her jaw was doing the thing people's jaws do when they're trying not to let their face do what it wants to do. I can pay half today, she said. I can send the other half in 2 weeks when I get settled. I have your number now. It's fine, Lorne said. I will pay it. I know you will. She paid the half. He walked her out to the van, checked the belt tension one more time, made sure the reservoir was seated right. Bia had found an old shop rag somewhere and was carrying it around like a trophy. Leave that, Rune told her. Let her keep it, Lorne said. Rune buckled Bea into the car seat. She stood by the driver's door for a moment, one hand on the frame. Thank you, she said, for last night. For all of it. Drive safe, Lorne said. Sudbury's a long stretch yet. She nodded, got in. He watched the caravan pull out onto the road and turn north. Then he went back inside and put on a fresh pot of coffee and started prepping for the next job. 3 weeks passed. The invoice didn't get paid. He hadn't expected it to. Not because he doubted her, but because life at 26 with a 3-year-old in a new city, and whatever she was running from, was a lot of variables. He'd already written it off in his head. He was okay with that. What he was not okay with was the letter from the municipality. It came on a Thursday. He almost missed it in the stack of invoices and parts catalogs, but the return address, Town of Petanguishin Property Services, made him stop. It was a notice of intent to reassess. The strip of commercial property the shop sat on had been flagged as part of a development corridor review. Nothing confirmed yet. Just a notice, just a letter. He called the number on the letter, got voicemail. He called again Friday, got a man named Quennell who spoke in the gentle, practiced tones of someone paid to deliver unwelcome news with maximum ambiguity. The review was ongoing. No decisions had been made. He would be contacted in due course. Lorne hung up and sat in his office for a while, looking at the walls. 11 years of invoices, pinned schedules. A photograph his mother had taken of him standing in front of the shop. The first week it was his. A boy who looked younger than 34 looked now. He'd borrowed to buy the equipment. He'd borrowed to fix the roof 3 years ago. The margins on a one-bay independent shop in a small Ontario town were not the kind of margins that leave much room. If the property got rezoned, if the lease got broken, he didn't let himself follow the thought to its end. Instead, he went out into the bay and started on the transmission job that had been waiting. He didn't tell anyone. There was no one, really, to tell. His uncle Fernand would offer to lend money he didn't have. His friend Corbett from the hockey league would say something supportive and unhelpful. His neighbor, Mrs. Tessay, would bring a casserole, which he would eat alone. He kept working. In October, a young guy named Briscoe Lamb came in looking for a part-time apprenticeship. 21. Just finished his first year of the automotive program at Georgian, needed the hours. Lorne took him on 3 days a week. It helped. The kid was good. Quiet, careful, learned fast. He didn't talk much, which suited Lorne. In November, the second notice came. This one was more specific. The Development Corridor Review had identified the Cadio Auto property as potentially eligible for reclassification as mixed-use residential. A public consultation meeting was scheduled for the second Tuesday of December. Lorne read it twice. Then he folded it and put it in the drawer with the first one. He went to the meeting, sat in the back of the municipal chambers with 7 other people who had received similar letters. A dry cleaner, a framing shop, a woman who ran an alterations business out of her front room. The development project was a condo complex, apparently. Someone from the south had bought the land parcel to the east and wanted to expand west. The municipality was reviewing options. A man in a nice coat made a presentation with slides. There were words like revitalization and community benefit and phased transition. There were no words like 11 years or every person in this town who's driven their car to my shop in a blizzard. Lorne drove home in the dark and did not sleep. The call came on a Friday afternoon in the first week of December, while Briscoe was running the alignment machine and Lorne was on the phone with a parts supplier about a back-ordered sensor. It was a 705 number he didn't recognize. Lorne Cadio? Speaking. This is... You probably don't remember me. My name is Rune McAllister. You helped me and my daughter on Barry Road back in September. Broken down van, middle of the night. He remembered immediately. He just hadn't expected her voice to come through his phone in December. I remember, he said. I owe you money, I know. I'm calling about that, but it's something else. A pause. I've been thinking about you. About your shop. I looked you up. I saw the reviews. Another pause, and this one carried something different in it. And I saw the thing about the development review. He was quiet for a moment. Where did you see that? The town's planning document. It's public. She hesitated. I work in municipal advocacy now. I took a job at a community legal clinic in Sudbury. It's what my degree is in. I never finished, but I've been doing the work for a few years. She stopped. I don't want to overstep. You helped me when you didn't have to. And what's happening to your shop isn't right. And I know some people. Lorne stood in his office, the parts supplier still on hold on the other line. He didn't say anything for a moment. What kind of people? He finally said. What Rune had was not magic. It was not a single phone call that fixed everything. It was work, slow and unglamorous. The kind that doesn't make good headlines because it happens in emails and procedural objections and public records requests and meetings where someone has to sit in the back of a room and know exactly which question to ask. She filed an objection on behalf of the affected businesses under a provision of the Planning Act that required the municipality to demonstrate meaningful community consultation before initiating a rezoning review. The consultation meeting, the one with the man in the nice coat and the revitalization slides, did not meet the threshold. She pulled in a woman from a Sudbury clinic named Ogechi Nwachukwu, who had been fighting a similar development in Elliott Lake for 2 years and knew the procedural landscape cold. She pulled in a housing advocate from Toronto named David, who had done research on small business displacement in transitional corridors. She filed documents. She answered the municipality's counterfilings. She did it on evenings and weekends, on top of her actual caseload, because she had decided that she was going to do this, and she was not someone who undid decisions once she'd made them. Lorne found this out over the course of many phone calls that winter. They started professional and became something harder to name. Not quite friendship, not quite something else. Just 2 people who had each been surviving alone for a long time, talking honestly in the late evenings when the day's work was done. He told her about his mother. She told him about B's father, who was not in the picture, and was not going to be. He told her about the first winter he'd run the shop alone, when the furnace died in January, and he'd worked in his coat for 2 weeks rather than close. She told him about the night on Barry Road, about the tow company in Barry, the voicemail in Midland, the moment she'd found his number in a local directory and called it and thought, if this one says no, I don't know what I do. I almost didn't answer, he told her. On a Tuesday night in January, the shop dark behind him, the parking lot empty and white. I know, she said. You told me, in September. I've thought about that a lot. What did you think? She was quiet for a moment. Outside, somewhere in Sudbury, it was probably snowing too. That it's strange, she said. How much depends on a person deciding in a moment to be one kind of thing instead of another. The municipality withdrew the rezoning application in March. It was not dramatic. There was no ceremony, no announcement, no man in a nice coat retracting his slides. There was an email from the planning office to the affected property owners, stating that following the review of the submitted procedural objections, the municipality had determined that the current application did not meet the threshold for advancement, and the review would be closed. Lorne read the email 3 times. Then he went out into the bay and stood there for a while. Briscoe was doing a brake job on a Civic. He looked up. Everything okay? Yeah, Lorne said. Everything's okay. He called Rune. She answered on the second ring, and he could hear in her voice that she already knew Ogechi had called her. And he could hear something else too, something that had been wound tight for months and was now, carefully, being allowed to loosen. Thank you, he said. You paid it back already, she said. In September, you just didn't know that's what you were doing. He drove up to Sudbury in April, which was not something he'd planned, and then found himself planning it anyway. He told himself it was to settle the invoice in person. He told himself it was because Bia had apparently been asking about the hoist man for months, according to Rune, who had relayed this with the dry, measured amusement of someone who was pretending to find it merely funny. He brought the shop rag. He'd cleaned it, folded it, put it in the glove box in October, and it had ridden there through the whole winter. Rune opened the door of her apartment with Bia on her hip, which was where Bia apparently lived. Bia looked at Lorne with the same serious, philosophical expression she'd had at 1 in the morning in a cold auto shop 7 months ago. Then she reached out and took the shop rag from his hand with great ceremony and held it to her chest. Rune looked at Lorne. Lorne looked at Rune. Come in, she said. I made food. He came in. She had made food. It was a good evening, and then a longer evening than he'd planned for. And outside, the April snow came down soft on a city that was still working out how to become the next version of itself, which is the permanent condition of all cities and most people. The sign at Cadio Auto still read CaddyX Auto. He kept meaning to fix it. Maybe that fall, he thought, maybe when things settled. But there was always another job waiting, another car that needed someone who would take the time to listen to what it was telling him. And there was a phone that sometimes rang at midnight, because word had gotten around. Somehow the way word gets around in small towns, that if you were stranded on a back road north of the city in the cold and dark and didn't know who to call, you called Lorne. He always answered, not because it made business sense, and not because someone was watching, and not because he'd ever found a good reason not to. Just because there's a version of a person who closes up at closing time and drives home and doesn't look back, and there's another version who picks up the phone. He'd made that choice once without thinking, on a cold Tuesday night, and everything that came after. The girl, the fight, the spring, all of it, had turned on that one ordinary moment when a tired man with cracked knuckles and a bad back decided that whatever came next, he was going to be the kind of person who answered.